How are you? Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be giving our presentation on interviewing. My name is Nick Moretti. I'm here with Group 3. So our topic of interviewing consists of many different things about how to plan an interview and everything that goes on in this process. So basically, we've all been there. We've all been in that situation where we're trying to get a job and we work for a company, and we're going to do the interview process. But basically, I'm going to be focusing on the role of the person doing the interviewing. So there's a lot that goes on in that interview process. So to focus on the interviewer, I'm going to talk about what steps they have to take to prepare and everything they need to do in order to be a qualified interviewer. So to begin, there's a lot that goes in and there's a lot that goes on during an interview. And there's a lot that the person has to be prepared to do. So to begin with that, I'm going to be talking about structure. Structure is something that's needed in the interview. You're going to have structured questions and you're going to have structure for the interview. You want the beginning process, you want the middle, the end, and you want the debriefing, the question process, the feedback process, and the conclusion, where the interview ended. So basically, you want to have a good plan of action. You want to execute the interview. You want to plan and prepare everything that you want to say, and then the performance obviously would be the actual asking of the questions. Um, yeah, so you want to have all your questions laid out in front of you. Brings me to my next topic. Questions. You want all of the, oh, okay. The important factor would be the handshake. Is the beginning and the end of the interview. Something that Dr. Casper has talked a lot about. We start our class with a handshake, and it lets you know a lot about the person you're shaking the hand. You basically get you develop that connection. So like the beginning of the interview, you want to talk about the job specifications, the job details, if they don't already know, things that you want that candidate to possibly know for the position. So that brings me to questions. Questions, you want to have all your questions basically written down and right in front of you. You want to be able to have, you want to go write down a list of your questions, and you want to have space for notes, and you want to be well prepared, because if you're not well prepared, then you're unorganized. And if you seem unorganized as an interviewer, it doesn't seem like you're representing your company well enough. So what kind of questions are we going to be asking? We're going to be asking behavioral interview questions. What type of questions are these? These are the, tell me about a time when, how would you react in this situation? Basically, like, tell me about a time where you got an achievement. How did you get that achievement? Tell me about a mistake, how you went about fixing it. It tells a lot about the person and gives them a chance to talk. Which brings me to my most important point, past, future, now. Basically, when they tell about their past experiences, they're going to be sharing, and it gives the best indicator for future experience and how they will work in the company. So basically, while they're telling you all this stuff, you want to be taking copious notes. Not a lot, but you want to be taking out anything that you hear that is important. You want to be writing down what the answers to their questions, anything you notice, and then also you want to be focusing on their physical appearance, how they're answering the questions, anything you notice, are they qualified? And you want to make sure your notes are legible. You want to make sure everything you have is legible that you wrote down. That way that when you are finished the interview, you are able to reflect on what you've written down. You also need to know when not to speak and when to speak. Speaking is obviously crucial to the interview. There's tons of back and forth that goes on. When you speak, you want to be loud and clear. You want to get your point across and ask questions and make sure that there's no stumbling around, basically. And you also need to know when not to speak, something that Donald Trump really doesn't know how to do. So another very important aspect of the interview process is listening. Listening is crucial because you need to be a good listener. When you ask these questions, you want to be able to listen to their responses, engage with them, ask follow-up questions, and that's just a key component to the interview process, along with eye contact. Eye contact is something that's very important that goes on in the interview. It allows you to engage with that person. Basically, it shows that you're listening. Take some notes and then look up for a second. Make sure you're looking at them, so you have a chance to connect with that person, that possible candidate. Somewhere we've all been on, obviously, is for the experience that I have. We did the interviewing experience, and that was where we got to interview a candidate. And I got to interview somewhere that I interned for the Rome Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. So I interned there, and I got to interview one of the professors there, and he's one of the departments of history. It's him on the right. That's Stephen Haig. He is a he has his PhD.
That's Stephen Haig.
Yeah.
I started that guy.
Yeah,
But I read the thing. So go ahead.
He's a great professor. Teaches a lot, and he's also pretty intimidating to interview because he has so many achievements. So it's kind of intimidating to ask him all these questions. So I learned a lot from that experience. I learned how to be a good listener, how to prepare questions, and just basically how to be more prepared for that interview. So basically, I talked a lot about the role of the interviewer. It's an important role, and basically, um, there's a lot that goes on during the interviewing process, and that would be planning, having your questions ready, and just being overall well prepared for the interview. And that brings me to my next topic, which I'm going to be passing the torch to Gab. She's going to be talking about being prepared for the interview and what comes with all of that. So I'm going to pass the torch to Gab. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Oliveto, and I'm going to be telling you about how to prepare for a job interview. And I'm going to talk about job postings. I'm going to talk about what to just wear for the interview, some courtesies you can do for the person, job analysis, and some questions and specific questions that you can give. So, a job posting, the definition is it's an advertisement made by somebody in the staff. So, it could be made by an HR recruiter, it could be made by just the staff in general, and it's posted anywhere. It can be posted on Glassdoor. Everybody knows what that is. If you're looking for a job, it's a job where the job posting is. It can even be around campus. So the reason for job posting is because a company always needs a candidate to apply for the job, and usually people are hiring, they're firing people, people are quitting, people are just retiring. So there's always a reason for a person to need this job. So a job posting format is basically what it looks like. It just gives a little bit about the position. It says where the location is, which is huge because you want to know where you're going every day. And it also gives you a reason on why to apply to this job, and just a little bit about like a little brief description too. So there's two types of job postings. There's internal and there's external. And internal is a person who you interview within the company, is already part of the company, and then an external person would be a person if you don't have a job, a person like you, just going to interview for a position, maybe an internship, a job, one of those. And some warnings for internal and external. So if you want, you're running, a person wants to be a manager of a company, the interview person would probably focus on the internal person who's already worked at the company because they probably have more experience than an external person, depending on the interview. And just a little description on what to wear. I mean, you're gonna wear what you wear every day to work, but you can also just dress a little better. You can wear a nicer blazer. You can wear a nicer watch. Just give impression because the interview person's gonna look at that and gonna be like, oh, that person wore that. That was nice. Maybe I can do that next time. It gives impression. And also a big thing is to be comforting. Be comforting to the person. Obviously, a person's going to be so nervous for an interview, as anybody would, and if they might go off a little topic with their interview, and you can't go off topic with them, just go with the flow. Like just say everything's gonna be okay, and they also might go into the nonverbal hand, like the hand is moved for nervous, or they won't give you eye contact, and and they might like cross their feet or just babble. That's nervous, but if they give you good eye contact, they give you the right answers, that means they're probably ready for this position. Also, from my experience, I recently went on an interview and I walked into the company and my interview person was so comforting. He introduced me to the whole team right then and there, offered me a glass of water, offered me coffee. I literally felt like I was in that company when I was literally just going for an interview. So job analysis for the company is more about the job in greater detail. It's important. It's with the person you're going to give this information to the person you're interviewing about the company, and they're going to ask you questions about it too. It goes into compensation, it goes into selection procedures, and it goes into performance review. So compensation is probably the number one question that the interview person's probably going to ask you. And that all depends on the skill level, it depends on how experienced they are, the level of education they have. If they also talk about, then that goes into the selection procedure. And the selection procedure is you can do that with tests. You can do that with tests that are written. You can do that test with that are oral tests. You can do simulations. And from that, that will give you a good background on what that person can do. And that can go into the performance review, which then you review that candidate and see what they actually are capable of for this position and compare the tests maybe to ones that already have taken it, and it can show you what they are capable of for the company that you are currently working for. And there's also methods for job analysis. So there's multiple, but method that I saw was a good one is you interview a person who's already working in the company, and then you can use those answers to give this information to the candidate you're interviewing. It'll give you more of a background of what they want. And also, the jobs are analyzed. So they're analyzed because they're just the aspects that you can get. They are analyzed by the simulations and what the performance is about and how like the environment stuff. So I'm going to go into a little bit about questions. Molly will talk about it after me, but if you have key responsibilities, you can develop questions by those key responsibilities. So you could just have the key responsibilities, make a question list, and then it will go into more specific questions. So if you're interviewing a person for HR, say recruiter, and those key responsibilities, you can make questions off of those key responsibilities. So those are specific questions. You need those specific questions so you can actually know what that person is what they're going to do. So, an example, you're not going to ask the same questions to everybody. Like for a CEO, you're not going to ask the same questions as a CEO as a crossing guard. CEO, you obviously are going to ask business professional questions and harder questions, and crossing guards, you're going to ask a lot of questions, but they're going to be basic questions, so it won't really relate. All right, thank you very much. I hope you liked my interview about talking about preparing for my presentation talking about it, preparing for an interview. Now here's Molly with questions.
Hey everyone, I'm Molly. So I'm going to be talking about writing the interview questions. So Nick and Gab kind of went over the more human interaction part to an interview, but there's a lot of preparation that actually needs to go in beforehand in writing questions specific to that interview. So regardless of how you choose to write your interview questions, they're all going to have the same goal. You want to figure out who the candidate is. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but ultimately, before you make a decision, you have to get an understanding of how someone's going to work with your company. So like Gab said, you need to figure out what you're looking for, and this can be a little overwhelming, but you need to figure out what traits and skills you want out of a candidate before you can even begin to design your questions. Like she said, you wouldn't ask the CEO the same question as a crossing guard. So it's something to keep in mind before you sit down to start writing interview questions. And there's a lot of different types of questions that you can ask. A really common one is, what's your greatest strength? But they found that that's not always the best way to get an understanding of someone's work performance. So usually behavioral based questions is regarded as the best method for interviewing. So it's really important to get an indication of someone's past behavior because, like we all know, past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. So, you want to ask about scenarios that you're going to be able to get a feel for how the candidate is going to act in your workplace. This is really important for a lot of reasons. You only get maybe 2 to 3 interviews before you have to make a decision with a person. And a lot of stuff won't come up on a background check, and a lot of companies won't say negative things in a reference check. So it's really up to you to figure out, how they're going to react in certain situations. Um, so I'm a recruiter for a company called Oaks Integrated Care. So we hire people to work with individuals with developmental disabilities. So like really vulnerable population. So it's really important to screen candidates. So I was doing an interview with a candidate for direct care position, and I asked her a behavioral based question. I think it was something like, tell me about a time that you had to offer guidance to one of your clients because it required experience. So she answers the question by saying, oh, well, I had this client, his name was blah, blah, blah. He had autism, all this personal information. So obviously, I didn't even need to know about her past behavior because I was witnessing her present behavior, that she was clearly violating HIPAA. She was telling me, a client, that she was still working, so she was still bound by HIPAA, all the personal information. So I knew right then and there that her behavior was an indication that she wasn't ready for the job. And that's something that you really need to keep in mind because, when you hire someone, they're your employee. They're going to be out there. They're going to be representing your company. They can be a liability. They can cause you, legal troubles. They can, have you get in trouble with work for not properly screening a candidate. So it's really important that you design your questions in a way that you're going to learn about them. And for the behavioral-based questions, you always want to start with, tell me about a time when. This is the best way to keep the candidate on track, and you want to kind of get them into like a story time mode that they're going to tell you a specific thing that happened to them. And other wordings might get them a little confused. So you always want to start with, tell me about a time when. And it's really important that you make sure your questions make sense. And this is something that's often overlooked. A question could be really, really specific, or it could be way too vague. And each way has its own problems in the interview process. So if a question is too specific, the interviewee is going to be stumped. And one of two things is going to happen. Either they're just going to say flat out, I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question, or they're going to make up some scenario because it's too specific for them to actually connect it to their real life. And, when a question is vague, it has its own problems too. So when a question is too vague, they're not going to answer in the way that you want because they don't know how to answer in the way that you want. They're not really sure what you're asking. So they might go in a different direction that's not exactly what you intended for them to answer. So it's really important to make sure that it's not too specific or impossible to answer, but it's also not too vague. And a good way of judging your interview questions is to practice with yourself or have someone else ask you a question. See how you respond. And if your response makes sense and it's what you're looking for, then you know it's good. And if you don't really know how to answer your own question, you probably need to go back to the drawing board. So a lot of the questions that you're going to write are going to be focused more around soft skills, communication, things like that. An example of this is customer service. Tell me about a time that you had to deal with an angry customer. That's really what's going to get you a feel for the candidate's personality, their temperament, things like that. So most of the positions, that you're filling are going to focus on that. But there are positions that you might really need to write questions that are really technical and focus on hard skills. For example, for a tech company, they're not going to be so much looking for the soft skills, and they're going to more be looking for hard skills, like working with specific programs. They might ask you, tell me about a time that you had to fix an error in Windows. So it really depends on what industry you get into. But it's always important to remember that, you really just need to make sure that your questions make sense. Make sure that they're specific to your position that you're hiring for. And then you also just want to be paying attention to the candidate's responses to the questions, making sure that they align with the question. But it's also important to remember that even if someone answers all of the questions the way that you want to, they still might not be the best person. You want to pay attention to their mannerisms, their etiquette, do they send a follow-up letter? Things like that can also give you an idea of how the candidate will act. So questions aren't everything. You got to have everything there. Okay, so now you're ready to write interview questions, and I'm going to pass it on to Sean.
Okay, my name is Sean, and well, the three of them talked about the interviewer. I'm gonna be as the interviewee, or opposite. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I'm gonna be the interviewee as opposed to the interviewer. And then my first slide I got is just you want to come in with confidence. The handshake's all about you want to dress right, and you just gotta come in with the confidence for the interview. And then going into it, you want to know the basics. You definitely want to know the basics of the company. So if you ask yourself what went wrong with the interview, if they ask you what the company did, you got to know more than just why they make money, how they do that. You got to know more. You got to know their culture. You got to go into it. And you definitely don't, if you don't know anything about the company, it definitely is something that's going to put you into the no pile right away. Now, a little bit about bad answers because bad answers do come up a lot in interviews, and I've definitely given bad answers. You got to be prepared for any type of question because questions can go anywhere in an interview. You never know what you're going to get asked when you're up there, so be prepared for everything. And then, why should we hire you? If someone asks why you want to be hired, why they should hire you, you don't want to say anything about the pay. It's not about the money. You want to talk more about the company's culture, a chance to grow within the company, the benefits, the company structure, anything like that that goes more to depth and it's not just about the money. And then you definitely also never want to badmouth an employee or an old employer if you're asked about an employer. You want to you just want to, if asked why you left, you want to say you left because you didn't fit in the culture, you didn't like it there or something like that. You never want to badmouth them though. And then if you're asked about weaknesses also, never say you don't have weaknesses. Everyone has a weakness. And if you do, even if you were to say you didn't have a weakness, eventually it would come up while you're at work and you get exposed because everyone has a weakness and it's going to come out at some point if you got the job. So another obvious thing is teamwork. Every company's looking for someone who can work well in a team and is willing to work well with teams. So if you're asked about teamwork and if you do work well with teams, never say no. You always want to be part of the team and let them know you're willing to be part of the team. And also body language. No matter what goes wrong in the interview, never let it show. Never let it frustrate you. Because if you can't handle a little bump in the road in an interview, what's going to happen when a problem in the workplace arises? You're not going to be able to handle that well either. So you can't let the frustration get to you. Another common interview question is, I'm going to switch from bad questions to good questions now. Those are bad interview answers. These are going to be good interview answers. And again, you're going to want to start with the handshake and the confidence walking in. But when someone asks you to tell you about yourself, you don't want to give a long background story about yourself, your whole life, your childhood, your family, everything. You want to be short to the point. You don't need to repeat stuff that's on your resume because obviously they have the resume. It'll be there for them. And you just want to be quick and to the point about whatever they're asking. Another popular question they ask is about the company. Do you know about the company? And I said a bad answer before could be to not know anything about it. So just go in, know their mission, know their structure of the company, know what they stand for, more than how they make their money. And then a good answer to why they should hire you. Here you want to crack three things. You want to show them that not only can you do the work, you can do the work better than the other employees, and you are willing to you're willing to fit in and adapt to the culture. And then when you're asked about your strengths, if you're asked about your strengths, you definitely want to make sure you're accurate with your strengths. Don't just say something that you think the interviewer might want to hear, because although that might help right then and there, in reality, it doesn't work. A 5-year plan, if you're asked about the future with the company, if you plan to stay, be honest and specific about your future goals. If you do plan to stay with the company and you want to stay with the company, make sure you let your hiring manager know that you've got a realistic set of expectations for your career and you want to grow in that career. And then if you're asked questions like why you want to work in that specific position, you need to find something that fits like that tailors to the question that she asked. And you never want to lie, whether it's on the resume or whether it's about one of the like she give you an example. You never want to lie about a situation that happened, a task you achieved, anything like that. You never want to make anything up, or even just stretching the truth too. And then next comes to STAR interview questions. I'm gonna start with S, which is the situation, and that's just where the interviewer asks the interviewee a question, and then the interviewer responds with a similar situation in where they've accomplished or faced something like that. And then the T is for task. You want to keep it specific but concise. You want to let them know what task you accomplished, and you want to make sure you specify any challenges you face. But you don't need to detail everything in that one. You're going to detail everything in the action phase, in which way you want to describe exactly what you did. You want them to know anything that you specifically did that helped the task to get complete. Anything if you took a leadership role, if you just how what you did that contributed to the overall outcome of the task. And then R is for result, and then that's just where you share the results of the situation and show how you contributed, and you let them know how you what you accomplished and what you learned. And now I'm passing it off to Ariana.
Thank you. So, hi, my name is Ariana. Today I will be talking to you about how to ease the candidate, note taking, and timing of your interviews. A little background about myself. I am currently working for Martin Insurance Group as our HR coordinator. So, first, when the candidate walks through the door, you want someone there to greet them. This helps ease the candidate because they know they've arrived at the correct location, and it also puts the company's best foot forward. The person greeting them can either be a receptionist, an assistant, or if you have some time, even you. Then you want to ask them if they want something to drink. They might be nervous, so their throat might be a little bit dry. So coffee, water, tea, nothing crazy. And also, you're going to be asking them to talk for a half hour to an hour, so you want them to be comfortable and able to answer all of your questions. Next, the location of the interview. This is very important because is it too hot in the room? Is it too cold? Is it in the back corner of the office? Can you see what's going on? You want to make this room as comfortable for both the employer and the candidate. This should be a room that puts everybody at ease. No one should be walking on eggshells. This is Martin Insurance Group's interview room. As you can see, we have the core values listed on the wall. On the back wall, or window really, you can see the parking lot. It lets some air and light in. And then on the other side, which you can't see, you can see the floor. So people can get a glimpse of what it's like to work at Martin and what employees look like. So during the interview, you want to make sure that your questions are clear and concise. The more confusing you are, the more confused the candidate will become, and overall, they'll just become more nervous. If a question keeps stumping candidates, you want to make sure, is it the question or maybe you didn't find the right candidate? So you want to look at that. The foundation of the company, you want to give that to the candidate as well. This is a time to bring up the history, values of the company, and then this way the candidate can review their values and see if they match up with the company and see if it's a place they want to work for, if both values match up. Also, you don't want to throw a curveball during an interview. Don't do the Spanish Inquisition, which is just making the situation very uncomfortable for everybody. at the end of the day, if you're making someone uncomfortable, they're not going to want to come work for you. So just be mindful. We've all been in that other seat and been interviewed before and been the candidate, so just look out for that. During the interview process overall, just smile at the candidate. Smiling not only helps you relax your facial features so you're not as rugged when going through it, but it also helps the candidate to just take that positive energy and smile and relax themselves. So when you walk into the interview, you want to have your questions written out with spaces next to them to take notes with. You might even want to consider having an extra notepad or an extra piece of paper, so if you do follow-up questions, you have space to write that answer as well. You want to just make sure you're taking notes throughout the whole process. And while you're taking notes, you want to make sure that you're just writing down not every single syllable someone's saying, just enough information for you to remember the conversation you had with that candidate. This way, when you go back, you can expand upon that. Then, after the interview, schedule 5 to 10 minutes immediately after once the candidate leaves. This way, the interview is still fresh in your brain. You want to go back, you want to elaborate on any thoughts that you had previously. You also want to maybe add a few things that you didn't have a chance to while the candidate was there. Your timing, overall, your interview process, how long is it? Is it a phone interview, a phone screening, 3 rounds of interviews? You got to take that into consideration because you will upset the candidate and overwhelm them, and you might have some candidates that fall off because your process is too lengthy. You want to be mindful of their time as they are being mindful of yours. They're showing up to your interviews, they're working with you, hopefully they're on time. So you want to be mindful of their time too, as most people might not have a job, so they're actively looking for the first thing that comes their way. So looking at your process, if you have a few different rounds, see if you can shorten it down. Bring a few more people in during that first interview and not make an hour interview with each person into 3 hours now that everyone's in that same room. Do maybe 5, 6 questions per person. Have everyone collaborate prior so you can see who's asking what questions so everyone gets the information that they need. So maybe take your time with your phone screening, maybe 5 minutes max. Just see if they know the basic and they meet the basic qualifications, if they know about the job description. Clearly, they know what they're coming into and they are interested. And then maybe an hour and a half for the first round and 45 minutes for second. And if you go to third, maybe half hour. Throughout the whole process, you want to make sure that you are communicating depending on your length and your time. You want to just make sure you're reaching out when these candidates aren't coming in. They will drop off if you aren't constantly communicating and making sure they are still interested so you can extend an offer to them. And on the flip side of things, the candidates that you don't extend that offer to, common courtesy, just reach out to them so they know that they did not get the job. You don't have to say why. You can just say, we offered it to somebody else. I thank you for your time and coming in. We really appreciate it. You don't want to burn a bridge with a candidate that you might want on your payroll later on. So to recap our presentation, we talked about how to prepare for your interviewer from the employer side, good questions and bad questions on the employee side, how to write questions, how to ease the candidate, timing of your interviews, and note taking. So that is our presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Maybe? No? Yes.
What's your favorite interview question?
My favorite interview question would probably be a behavioral one. Tell me about a time when, the one we use at work is tell me about a time where you had to deal with a situation that wasn't in your favor and how'd you resolve the issue. Thank you.
Well done, group. Oh, Steve Hagee? Yeah, well, I started with him. I haven't seen him in like 6 years. And I didn't know what he'd gotten into here at the university, but this is the Holocaust Center. And, well, I put 2 and 2 together because you had done an interview with him and he'd written several things about him on that.
Yeah.
And he seemed familiar, but until I saw his photo, I didn't click it all together. Okay, gang, what did you learn that you want to share?